was dead, not disconnected, not a fault in the wire. It was off the hook. A low, persistent hum from room 1046, bleeding into the switchboard of the hotel president. It was 11:00 a.m. January 4th, 1935. The morning telephone operator had noted the signal an hour earlier. Now, she sent a bellboy, Randolph Probst, to investigate. The 10th floor hallway was quiet. The carpets thick. The air still. Probst reached the heavy wooden door of 1046 and knocked. "Mr. Owen." Silence. Only the faint, distant hum of downtown Kansas City. He knocked again, harder this time. A sound returned from within. It was not a word. It was a low, guttural noise. A pained, rasping groan. Probst called out, "Bellboy." The door was locked. He tried the handle, firm. He used his passkey. The brass tumblers clicked, the latch retracted. He pushed the door open. The room was dark. It was a darkness that felt deliberate. Heavy shades were drawn tight against the weak winter light, just as they had been for 2 days. The only illumination came from a single, dim bulb on a small bedside lamp, casting long, grotesque shadows. And in that weak, yellow light, Probst saw him, the man who called himself Roland T. Owen. He was on the bed, not in it, but on it. He was naked, huddled on a mattress soaked in a color darker than the shadows. His body was a map of fresh, brutal trauma. Blood was everywhere. On the sheets, the pillows, the telephone stand. It was splattered on the walls. It was, impossibly, on the ceiling. Owen was bound. Thick cords were wrapped tight around his neck, his wrists, and his ankles, digging deep into his flesh. He had been beaten savagely. His head was swollen, his skull fractured. His chest was a ruin of puncture wounds, the work of multiple stabbings. The most impossible fact, the one that stopped Probst's breath. The man was alive. His eyes, clouded with agony, flickered open. He saw the bellboy. Randolph Probst, trembling, backed out of the room and called the hotel manager. The manager called the police. When detectives arrived moments later, they leaned in close to the shattered man. They asked the only question that mattered, the question that would hang over this case for nearly a century. Who did this to you? Roland T. Owen, his lungs filling with blood, forced 2 words past his broken lips. Nobody. He was rushed to the hospital. He would never say another word. The police were left with a dying man, a false name, and a room locked from the inside. To understand the darkness in room 1046, you must understand the city it was in. Kansas City, 1935. This was the depths of the Great Depression, but it was also the height of the Pendergast political machine. The city was wide notify, a haven for organized crime, illicit gambling, and backroom violence. Justice was often a private affair. Into this city, on January 2nd, 2 days before the discovery, the man walked alone. He entered the lobby of the hotel president on Baltimore Avenue, a respectable, bustling establishment. He approached the front desk. He had no luggage. He signed the register. Roland T. Owen, Los Angeles. He listed his home address as a different hotel, the Cecil. In LA, he requested an interior room on a high floor. He was given room 1046. Hotel staff would later remember him. He was young, perhaps 20 to 35 years old. He was well dressed in a dark overcoat. He carried only a comb, a hairbrush, and a tube of toothpaste. Two physical features stood out, noted by multiple employees. He had a distinct cauliflower ear, the thickened, gnarled cartilage of a wrestler or a boxer. And, hidden beneath his dark brown hair, was a long, jagged scar that ran across his scalp. He took the key and went to his room. For the rest of that day, he was a ghost. He did not use hotel services. He did not make or receive calls. He was just there, a man with no bags in a dark room waiting. The next morning, January 3rd, the mystery began to take shape. Mary Soptic, a hotel maid, arrived for her morning rounds. She found the door to 1046 locked. This was unusual. Most guests were out for the day or would answer a maid's knock. She used her passkey and let herself in. The scene was unsettling. The room was just as Probst would find it later, heavy with shadow. All the shades were pulled. The only light was that same single dim lamp by the bed. Roland T. Owen was there. He was sitting on the edge of the mattress, wearing his undershirt and trousers, staring into the gloom. Soptic began to clean. Owen, his voice betraying anxiety, made a comment about the hotel's high prices. Soptic noticed he seemed nervous, agitated. As she finished her work and prepared to leave, Owen made a specific request. "Please don't lock the door when you leave," he said. "I am expecting a friend." Soptic, following hotel policy, explained that the doors locked automatically when closed from the outside. She assured him his friend could simply call from the lobby. Owen seemed to accept this. Soptic left, pulling the door shut. It clicked locked behind her. Roland T. Owen remained in the dark, waiting for dawn. Around 4:00 p.m. that same day, Mary Soptic returned to room 1046. She was carrying fresh towels. This time, she did not knock. As she approached the door, she heard voices from within. It was not one voice, it was two. She could hear Owen, and she could hear another man. This second voice was different, deep, rough, and commanding. Soptic knocked on the door. The rough voice answered, not Owen's. "Who is it?" "I have fresh towels," Soptic replied. "We don't need any towels," the voice barked. Soptic, unsettled, paused. She knew Owen was in there. She knew he was not alone. She left the towels outside the door and walked away. She was the last person to have any contact with Roland T. Owen while he was still, presumably, unharmed. She had heard the voice of the man he was waiting for. She had heard the man who may have been Don. The timeline of that night, the night of January 3rd, is fractured. The hotel, once a place of quiet commerce, became a container for unseen violence. The switchboard operator became an unwitting character in the drama. Around 7:00 p.m., a call came through for Roland T. Owen. The operator connected it. A few hours later, she noted the phone in 1046 was picked up, but no one spoke. She could hear only breathing. Then, later, the line went dead. Off the hook. There were other, stranger reports. A different hotel guest, a woman coincidentally named Jean Owen, no relation, was staying in room 1048, next to 1046. She would later tell police she heard a loud commotion that night. It wasn't just men. She heard voices arguing, a man and a woman. She stated it sounded like a party, loud and aggressive. This report is hard to reconcile with the two men Mary Soptic heard. Was there a third person, a woman? Or was the noise from a different room entirely? Its proximity to 1046, a bizarre coincidence. The report remains a confusing, unverified footnote. Then there was the call from Don. Miles away, at the Muhlebach Hotel, a man named Charles Blotcher was settling in for the night. He received a frantic, unexpected phone call. The man on the line identified himself as Don. He pleaded with Blotcher to come to the hotel president immediately, saying he was in trouble and needed help. Blotcher, alarmed and confused by the stranger's desperate tone, refused. The call was never traced. The night deepened. Silence fell over the 10th floor, a silence that concealed an act of methodical, horrific violence. We do not know the sequence of events. We do not know the weapon. We only know the result. Morning came, January 4th. The phone in 1046 was still off the hook. The operator sent Randolph Probst. He knocked. He heard the groan. He opened the door. Let us return to that room. The police who stormed in found a scene of pure, focused brutality. Owen was on the bed. The cords around his neck, wrists, and ankles were drawn so tightly they had sunk into his flesh, strangling the blood from his extremities. His skull was fractured from a heavy, blunt force blow. He had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest, the wounds deep, puncturing a lung. His pajamas, the only clothing in the room, were soaked in his own blood. And yet the search for evidence yielded nothing. There were no clothes, no dark overcoat, no trousers, no shoes, no suitcase. The only items found in the room, belonging to a man who had been there for 2 days, were a safety razor, a hairpin, an unsmoked cigarette, a small, uncorked bottle of diluted sulfuric acid, a necktie, and the telephone. The razor blade could not account for the stab wounds. The sulfuric acid had not been used on Owen. It was not the cause of death. It was just there. Another meaningless, sinister prop. No murder weapon was ever found. Police dusted the room for fingerprints. Several were recovered, but most were too smudged to be useful. One print, found on the telephone stand, was described in reports as belonging to a woman. This aligns with the report from Jean Owen, but contradicts the report from Mary Soptic. The investigation was already tangled in its own contradictions. And then there was the riddle of the door. The door was locked when Randolph Probst arrived. He had to use a passkey. How did the assailant or assailants leave the room and lock the door from the outside? At the General Hospital, detectives made one last, desperate attempt to get a statement. Owen was fatting. They asked him again, "Who did this to you?" He whispered, "Nobody." They asked, "What happened? What were you hit with?" He replied, "I don't know." They asked about the stab wounds. "I fell against the tub," he murmured. It was a clear, impossible lie. The injuries were methodical, defensive wounds were absent. This was not a fall. This was not an accident. This was torture. He mentioned Dawn one last time. He slipped into a coma. On January 5th, 1935, the man known as Roland T. Owen died. His identity was a lie. His death was a riddle. The police had a body with no name and a crime with no suspect. The case was now a homicide, but the victim was a ghost. Police in Kansas City ran the name Roland T. Owen against records in Los Angeles. No such person existed matching the description. The address he gave, the Cecil Hotel, had no record of him. The name was a fabrication, chosen for reasons that died with him. The police had only one lead, Dawn, the man Owen was waiting for, the man Mary Soptic heard, the man who called Charles Blotcher. They searched the city. They questioned hotel staff, taxi drivers, anyone who might have seen Owen with a companion. Dawn was as ephemeral as Owen himself. He was never found. The body of the man from 1046 lay in the city morgue, tagged John Doe. He was photographed. His fingerprints were taken and sent, fruitlessly, to Washington. The case went cold. The brutal, unsolved murder was swallowed by the daily crime blotter of a hard city. The man was eventually buried in a local potter's field, an anonymous victim of an unknown killer. The story should have ended there, but it didn't. Months later, in Birmingham, Alabama, a woman named Eleanor Ogletree was reading an old newspaper. It contained a syndicated article about the bizarre, unsolved murder of Roland T. Owen in Kansas City. She read the description. A young man, a prominent cauliflower ear, a distinctive, long scar on his scalp. She felt a cold dread. The description matched her younger brother, Artemus Ogletree. Artemus was 17 years old. In 1934, he had left Birmingham to travel the country, seeking work or adventure. The family had received a few letters from him, but then he had vanished. The family's attempts to follow up were slow, hampered by distance and the grief of uncertainty. Then, more than a year after the murder, in the fall of 1936, the phone rang in the home of Ruby Ogletree, Artemis's mother. The caller was an anonymous woman. She knew about the Kansas City murder. She knew about their search for Artemis. And she told Ruby, with chilling certainty, that the man known as Roland T. Owen was, in fact, her son. Soon after, a package arrived. Inside was a letter and a photograph. The photo was the post-mortem picture of Roland T. Owen. Ruby Ogletree looked at the face of the dead man. It was her son, Artemis. The family immediately contacted the Kansas City police. The body was exhumed from the potter's field. Dental records confirmed it. Roland T. Owen was gone. The victim was Artemis Ogletree, a 17-year-old boy from Alabama. The discovery solved who he was. It solved nothing else. It only deepened the mystery. Why was a 17-year-old boy in Kansas City, far from home? Why did he check into a hotel under a false name, claiming to be from Los Angeles? Why did he tell the maid he was waiting for Dawn? And who was the woman who called his mother? The investigation was reopened, but it had no new leads. It had only more questions. And then, the final, chilling act of the mystery unfolded. This part of the story did not come from police reports, but from the funeral home that handled the body before the Ogletree family had been found, back when the victim was still the anonymous Roland T. Owen. The funeral home received an anonymous phone call. The caller, a man, wanted to ensure Owen received a proper, dignified burial, not a pauper's grave in a potter's field. He sent cash, enough to cover the entire cost of the service, to the funeral home. The anonymous benefactor had a specific request. He wanted Owen to be buried in Memorial Park Cemetery. The caller gave a reason. He stated specifically that this location was chosen because Owen wanted to be buried near his sister. The funeral home director, confused, had no way of knowing the truth. Artemis Ogletree had a sister. She had died years before. She was buried in a cemetery directly adjacent to Memorial Park. The anonymous caller, the man who paid for the funeral, knew Artemis. He knew his real name. He knew his family history. This man, who was very likely Dawn or connected to the killer, had paid for his victim's burial. But he wasn't finished. As if this gesture was not bizarre enough, another sum of money arrived at the funeral home. This time, it was to pay for flowers for the grave. A small card was attached to the floral arrangement. It contained 3 words: "Love forever, Louise." Who was Louise? Was this the woman Jean Owen heard arguing in the room? Was she the woman who left a fingerprint on the telephone? Was she the woman who called Ruby Ogletree? She, like Dawn, was never identified. The Ogletree family, tormented by the truth, received one last, cruel communication. In 1937, Ruby Ogletree received a final letter. The sender, whose identity was never discovered, claimed to be the killer. The letter, which the family reportedly destroyed in grief and fear, gave a reason for the horrific act. The writer claimed that Artemis Ogletree had been unfaithful to the writer's sister, and the torture and murder in room 1046 was an act of revenge. The letter's existence is only known through family lore. It was never seen by police. It cannot be verified, but it adds one more layer of motive jealousy, a crime of passion, a family affair to the impenetrable puzzle. And there the trail ends. Dawn was never identified. Louise was never found. The identity of the anonymous caller who paid for the funeral remains unknown. The case of Artemis Ogletree, the 17-year-old boy who checked into a hotel as a 30-year-old man and was tortured to death by nobody, was officially closed. Room 1046 is just a room now. The hotel president still stands, repurposed for a new era. But the facts of the case linger, embedded in the history of the building. The locked door, the drawn shades, the single dim lamp, the man in the dark waiting for a friend, the cryptic anonymous payments, the final whispered dying lie. It is a true crime story that defies explanation. A story where every fact only deepens the shadow and the truth remains locked inside a room, almost a century ago, with a ghost who called himself Roland T. Owen. This script is based entirely on the verified factual record of the 1935 murder of Artemis Ogletree, also known as Roland T. Owen. The primary sources for this narrative include official police reports from the Kansas City Police Department, contemporary newspaper archives, such as the Kansas City Star and the Kansas City Times, and subsequent historical analysis of the case by authors and researchers, including Dr. John Horner of the Kansas City Public Library. No dialogue has been fictionalized. The quotes attributed to Roland T. Owen, "Nobody, I fell against the tub, Mary Soptic. I am expecting a friend." And the man in the room, "We don't need any towels," are taken directly from police reports and witness statements. The details of the letters, the phone calls, and the funeral arrangements are all drawn from public records and the accounts provided by the Ogletree family. Where contradictions exist, such as the reports of male versus female voices, they are presented as they appear in the historical record, as they form a key part of the enduring mystery. This story is a dramatization of established facts, not a work of fiction.